Welcome back to Kevin Pollak's Chat Show. I am, as always, Chat Show. How the hell are you? I hope well. I hope as we are in the month of November and headed face first into the holidays, that you're feeling good, that if not, this little time you spend with us with your earbuds will somehow pick up your step a little bit and make life a little easier. If not, or if, write to us at kpcsfanmail@gmail.com and let me fucking know, man, because I do want to know. kpcsfanmail@gmail.com. I think I explained this last week. I had a little dental surgery. Well, I'll backtrack it even more. I think, biting an almond. And one of my main, well, I don't know if it's called an incisor, maybe. It's the fangy tooth on the side. Decided to crack down the middle. And that can't be good, I thought. Didn't really give me too much trouble. The upshot is, 2 days ago, it was yanked from my skull. The whole tooth. Nothing but the tooth. So help me. God, I'll fuck you up if you tell that joke again. I just now thought of it, I swear. I mean, it came out of my brain before I could stop it, is what I'm really trying to say. But it really was the whole tooth that came out of my skull. And I've got a little replacement kind of thing. They're going to eventually put a post followed by a permanent crown. Already too much information. I feel you. I do. Really just because my guest's eyes rolled back into his head as he's listening. So I can only imagine what you, who are just merely listening and not going to participate as much as he is, hopefully, are going through. The upshot is, I decided not to wear the little flipper thing that sits in its place for camera. And there could be a little change in the sound of my voice as my tongue or just the air goes through that area, that hole, as it normally wouldn't when I speak. Now, I wonder what would happen if I didn't say anything. You heard the sound and you thought, did that fucker have a tooth yanked? Why is he sounding like an old prospector? Those of you who give a good goddamn, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel drops December 5th, Season 2 on your Amazon Prime. And also, if it was like last year, Season 1, that's also on the Apple TV or however the fuck that works. I attended a guild screening of episodes 1 and 2 last week, and God, what a relief. What an unbelievable relief that it somehow exceeded expectation. You know, when a show, as we've been insanely fortunate enough to so-called break through the zeitgeist and have people talking about it, has a Season 1 that's seemingly successful. Season 2 can only be a letdown. In fact, it was just after the big Emmys, the party afterwards, the cast gathering already talking about when will the backlash begin. I mean, we could feel it in the room. The show won several that night. So by the time we got to the second to last award, which was Best Comedy, and we took the stage, you could feel the energy in the room. It was palpable. And the energy was said this, these fucking guys again? I mean, it was something I've never experienced. And I'm glad I did, because it was thick. So we're wondering when the backlash will be. We'll find out after December 5th. But I saw the first 2 episodes with an audience at this screening at a movie theater. Just to see it projected on a big screen with that sound was amazing, because the show is kind of cinematic. But to hear that live audience, man, you know, having started in the performing live trenches, all these years later, there's nothing like that live audience. They tell you there's no fucking editor between them and their reactions. It's all involuntary. And they hung on every word, and they laugh when we wanted them to. And there's a moment that is sad, but in a cute way. So to hear the whole audience go, "Aw," like they couldn't stop themselves from verbalizing that. That is a weird, fucking magical moment. So look forward to that. Also, I've released a new comedy podcast called Alchemy This. I'm going to drop a trailer from it at the ass of this episode into the feed Write to us. Let me know what you think about Alchemy This. Write to us at kpcsfanmail@gmail.com. We just started 3 weeks ago, and today it was shown to me that we have reached number 15 in the comedy podcast world. And again, there are 300,000 podcasts now. 75,000 of them are comedy podcasts. So thank you, those of you that just found out about it on Twitter or Instagram. That's the thing I want to talk to our guest about it too, which is, as a creative person, getting anything through the noise that people comment on, which you have in the next 2 emails. I threatened to read your emails. That's why I keep asking for them. So I'm now contractually obligated. Hey, Kevin, Jamie, and Sam et al. In parentheses, how the hell is all doing anyway? Question mark. And in parentheses, loyal listener, never missed an episode, blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing. 2 of your more recent 3 guests have the last name Smith, Yeardley and Kurtwood. It's Yardley. I don't know why I can't stop myself from reading and speaking Yeardley because of the way it's spelled. Yardley Smith, Kurtwood Smith. Strange connection, this person writes. But I noticed on looking up their biographical poop, as I often do when I listen to the chat show, that they were both born on July 3rd, and that is my birthday as well. And then in bold printing, stop fucking with my mind, Pollock. 2 exclamation points. Your pal, really? Jim Roman from Montclair, New Jersey. Wow, that is weird. It's weird that I had 2 out of 3 Smiths and that you share a birthday with them. Can I add one to you, Mr. July 3rd? Tom Cruise. Add that to your list. He too, July 3rd. The next one reads, and thank you, Jim Roman from Montclair, New Jersey, for that. This next one is from someone else. Sometimes I'm so professional, I scare even myself. This one is from Larry Portsline from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Hi, Kevin. Love the chat. You're crazy about the mazel. Here's an Ask Kevin for you. But first, the setup. A while back, I was having dinner with friends when one of the guys started telling us about an Australian buddy of his who happened to be Jewish. As a comic genius, Kevin, you must know this feeling. My smartass gene instantly clicked in, and in a matter of nanoseconds, I was thinking, Australian Jew. Never thought about that before. There's a joke there somewhere. What's the connection I can throw out there for a laugh? Meanwhile, this guy's going on with his story, and I've heard none of it, because all I'm thinking is, where's the connection? What's the joke? Suddenly my friend says about his Jewish Australian buddy, but this guy thought this was the greatest thing since, and like a bolt of lightning, I said, kosher Vegemite? The words were out of my mouth before I even knew that I had said them. Half the table laughed loudly. Some didn't get it. Or they got it and they didn't laugh. But one guy sat there dumbfounded, shook his head for a moment, and then quietly said, that was funny. Which to me was better than laughter. I know it's not the best damn joke in the world. No, it isn't, Larry. But the timing, the opening, the involuntary machinations of the comic part of my brain, and then the reaction of the friends all made me feel like I'd been touched by the divine hand of the comedy gods, if only for a moment. My question, Kevin, oh, good. It's a question. Is that what it feels like moment? And can you give us a similar example from your own life? You must have thousands. Much love and appreciation. Larry Portsline, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So yeah, that unfortunately for those of us that make the funny for a living, it's a gift and a curse because there's no off switch. There's no stopping those moments like you had, which are you hear something that sounds like the setup to a joke and you can't turn off the what's the joke? So yeah, welcome to hell. But of all the letters, emails that I read on the site, when you write to kpcsfanmail@gmail.com, that one was the perfect segue. Because my guest today, not so ironically, happens to be an Australian Jew. And let's ask him what he thinks of the kosher Vegemite joke. Ben Lee, ladies and gentlemen, bring those paws together. My guest is Ben Lee. Ben.
Yes, hello.
First of all,
shalom.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here.
I didn't realize I was here as a professional delegate from the Australian Jewish community.
Yeah.
But,
the joke was moderate as an Australian Jew.
I am so used to
bad attempts.
People being surprised that there are Jews in Australia.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Growing up as a Jew in Australia, I didn't think it was that unusual.
I'd be more surprised by Jews in Austria.
Right, maybe, yeah. So I'm so used to this strange reaction people have, like, there are Jews there? Do you know? And they'll list one other Jew, Australia, or something.
Do you know Tim?
Yeah, exactly. So it's really, so to me, it's not that funny. It's like people making like Crocodile Dundee jokes.
Oh,
like,
God.
you know. So,
yeah.
But anyway, thank you for having me.
Oh, so wonderful. And I hope you feel the same way when it's over. So let's start with how prevalent was the Jewish religion in your life growing up?
A fair amount. My parents were both Jewish. My sisters both had public school educations, and I was born. I'm 15 years younger than my next sister. Like, I was a very late arrival to the family. Last minute decision, they called me. And
perhaps not a decision at all.
No, they said they decided.
Oh, God bless.
I believe them. I feel like what's to keep protecting me from it, you know? But so I sort of got the role of the one who is going to get the Jewish education.
It
was kind of like one of those things where I was offered up, and I think my parents realized that they hadn't provided a Jewish education to the girls. And they're like, well, we've had a son, I guess give him a bris and send him to a Jewish day school. So I had that kind of thing in my family. Like, I was the one who knew the prayers on Friday night if we had dinner, lit the candles and everything. And also, I think in a deeper sense, it did kind of give me an early identity as someone who was grappling with religion and spirituality more so than other people in the family.
Interesting.
Yeah.
As a California Jew, you know, growing up Reform, we're basically Catholic. There was even a Christmas tree because my parents were also so Reform and relaxed religion-wise that they didn't know how to break it to the 4- and 6-year-old why they weren't getting a Christmas tree like all their friends. Having said that, I went to religious school every weekend till the 10th grade and was somehow confirmed, I think it was called, some sort of graduation. Went to bar mitzvah school and was bar mitzvah. Have great, weirdly, pride about being a Jew, but no religious interest ever. Also just organized religion isn't my bag. So I can't really explain the weird pride then that comes with the title.
Well, that's, I think, what my parents had. I mean, I look at it in a way as it's almost like living in purgatory when you feel so attached to an identity you can't let it go, but you truly don't want to go deeper into it.
Sure.
Right? It's kind of like with dating, like sooner or later you have to either like get married or move in together or break up.
Yeah.
You can't stay treading water.
No.
And I think people that have a very strong cultural identity as being part of a religion, it feels like similarly like stalemate because they don't want to leave and they don't want to stay. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So I think it looked a little frustrating to me. Maybe that's some of the reason why I've always been the kind of person who, like, I go deep into stuff that I'm into, because if I'm going to reject it, I kind of want to know what I'm rejecting.
I wish more people had a natural inclination to being better, informed.
Well, it's just sort of, to me, it's purely like selfish in that it feels frustrating to me to try and to not decide, to be indecisive. And I feel like as someone who like came up through like, punk rock music, and I started my career at 14, everything good has happened to me as a result of being decisive.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to touch on was how inexplicably angry you were through your art form at 14.
Well, it's weird. Anger's a weird one because it's also just like energy. Like, I think when you're a hormonal teenager, you feel this surge of energy.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's so hard to understand. I mean, sexuality and the power of like all that stuff happening.
And confusion.
It's so inexplicable and overwhelming that I almost think anger is like an easier emotion to turn it into.
Sure.
So I think that's probably why a lot of teenagers like angry music. And it's like, I feel so, I don't know what to do. I'll just scream. And so for me, there was, I guess, some sort of catharsis in that. But even I was pretty lame. Like I liked volume and I liked distortion. I didn't really like my expressions of rage were not particularly poignant. It was more like play acting, but I liked the volume and the aggressive-ness.
Yeah.
Electric guitars and drums and,
Were you inspired by another intense artist?
Well, there was, growing up in the time I was, late 80s, early 90s in Australia when I was sort of getting into music, it was just as alternative music was about to bubble up over the mainstream with Nirvana and everything. So I think Nirvana coming to Australia in 92 or 91, whenever that was a really big thing for me because I saw previously I'd been into music in the 80s growing up. I loved the Pet Shop Boys and Motley Crue and Bon Jovi and things that were so like hyper produced.
Sure. And
in a way unrelatable. And the amazing thing about what punk rock does every time it re-enters popular consciousness, even, I think of like, you get that now with rap music a lot, like Tyler, the Creator, like it just comes out of things he's making in his bedroom. Every time it resurfaces that punk attitude, it levels the playing field and it says, hey, you don't need a lot of stuff. You don't need a lot of money. Just make things. Make things on your own, do it. And that's like what Nirvana did for me at that level. But then there was a lot of bands in Australia in the indie scene and punk scene that were very influential to me with the same energy of just like, it wasn't about glamour. It wasn't about looking cool. It wasn't about thinking you're ever going to be famous. It was just trying to be awesome, trying to be loud and like, aggressive and exciting.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times we gather our friends and ultimately partners, love interests through mutually shared interests. And a lot of times that's involving literature or music or humor. Did you have a peer group that were also into this punk movement?
I was a bit that kind of person who I drag people with me into things. So like the first band I put together, Noise Addict, the other guys in the band it didn't matter whether they could play the instruments they were assigned, but they had access to them. So like the drummer, it was actually his older brother was a drummer, so he had a kit.
Sure.
I was like, okay, Josh, you're the drummer. He never wanted to be a drummer. His brother had a drum kit. I was that guy. I was so just bullheaded and determined to do what I wanted to do that, and again, this is where like the punk energy, it didn't matter that he couldn't play them.
Nope.
He had them. And he wanted to do it, and enthusiasm was all that mattered. And still, like, I'm learning tennis at the moment, and I'm still the guy who, like, I have no technique, but I have I'm scrappy.
Yes.
I have a lot of enthusiasm, and I'll make it happen with whatever I've got. So I'll go after the shots that no one else will go after.
You're a getter.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I was, as a kid starting a band. I was like, we'll do it. Let's make it happen.
And when you said to your friend whose brother had a drum kit, you'll be the drummer, and that friend, according to you anyways, had no interest in drumming.
Yeah.
How'd that go over?
He was like, okay. I mean, I've always been.
You're 14. He was like, fuck it. Why not?
Yeah, and I think part of actually my arc as an artist and as a human being has been about using persuasiveness responsibly. Because I think if you're a leader, you're often a naturally persuasive person. And you're an enroller. You engage people. You know what I mean? Like we all know people like this. There are people who like whatever they're doing, it kind of looks fun and we want to be part of it.
Yes.
And I think when I was younger, I took that for granted a little bit, that I could just like get people along with what I was doing, and now I'm like, oh, that's actually something that I need to think more about, because if we do have I don't mean a platform like being famous or something, but just if we have any form of charisma in which other people want to play along with our game,
right.
That's a nice responsibility that we need to kind of take care of a little and make smart choices with, I think.
I've never heard it said that way, but it is almost profound.
Well, it's almost like in this city, everyone who reaches any degree of success in entertainment has that.
Yes.
So it's not that unique here.
Well, maybe not
Yeah.
to the entertainment industry, but just in terms of, again, you were 14. I mean, most kids are just fucking off. If there's a leader, he is usually trying to figure out what they're going to do to get into trouble or what they're going to do to get a game going, whatever the sport of choice is, as opposed to let's begin our careers.
Well, for me, it was careerism, but it was more like I wanted to get free. The impulse of being locked into like, you know, bourgeois, like just middle class drudgery of going to university and being another person in my family who did like commerce law or something like it all just seemed so laid out and prescribed. And I sensed the claustrophobia in that from a very young age. And I saw that there was another thing. There was an artist thing. I didn't know what it was, but like I'd see Michael Jackson on TV and I go, that guy's like doing life by his own rules. And I just perceived that there was another agenda that was possible. And I was interested in that. I wanted to like free myself a little.
There's almost never a light bulb moment. It's usually a collective that you don't even realize is happening of moments.
Yeah.
Until you look back and went, fuck, the band's together.
Yeah, and some of it's like weird. Like I remember seeing Motley Crue in a documentary I liked where Vince Neil was in a hot tub that was embedded in the back of a limo.
That's right.
Do you remember that?
Sure.
Like, yeah. And he had girls and they were taking their tops off and everything. And it's such an archaic concept of success. But what I actually saw as a 10-year-old boy was he was having fun and doing what he wanted to do. Good, bad, or indifferent, the idea that like you didn't have to settle down and become one idea of what a grown-up was. And I do think in a way that like rock stars or even in our own little, you know, like I think about that movie Dazed and Confused and like the Matthew McConaughey part. He's like the rock star guy in that. And he's an upsetter. He's a spoilsport. He's someone who's kind of going like, I've got my own agenda. I'm not part of the social agenda going on in this community.
Right.
And in a way, like rock and roll music and punk music, it's always played that role.
Yeah.
It's always been like the spoil sport who goes, no, I don't accept those rules. I don't want to play it that way. I'm going to discover who I am outside of that. And, you know, Mike Watt, like he was in a band called the Minutemen and then the Stooges and a great local California, just punk legend. We played a gig together. This would have been probably 20 years ago. And I was doing this thing with all these keyboards at the time. And he came up to me, he said, this is what punk used to be like. Everyone was different.
Wow.
Before conformity came into the scene, what punk meant was doing your own thing and thinking for yourself. And so I always come back to that in whatever I'm doing in my life, like that ethos of like, can I be myself? Can I find what's authentic? Can I, even if it goes against the grain, that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. And it's evolved and morphed as have you.
And it has to. I mean, that's the other thing you learn about authenticity, that if you're actually like, so there's some pop stars, sometimes people go, oh, what do you think of this person? I'm not going to name any names or anything. I go, I'm fascinated by them as a mogul. I have zero interest in their art.
Right.
Like I think what they're doing as a business person is fascinating.
Yeah.
But I don't sense an artistic drop of blood running through their body because they're servicing an audience like a corporation.
Pandering.
Yeah, and to me that's kind of like great. I like following business too, and I like to follow people that are good at business, but that's not art. It's a different thing. Like artists, they're thinking first and foremost like, how do I get myself off on this experience?
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the audience part comes after that.
Right.
And so I just kind of look at it as, I don't know why I started talking about that, but I think it's like, there's just a different type of experience that exists outside of what, you know, sort of getting approval or something.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's a weird moment, I think, for anyone who's creative. You can call them an artist. I'm not as comfortable with the word because it makes me feel like
They're pretentious or something?
Yeah, that's probably the word. I don't ever hear it as pretentious when someone else says it. That's the weird thing. But when I say it, I do feel a little too self-critical. So as a creative person, there's a moment where you either embrace that show business is a two-part venture, or you are a true artist, original, who the audience either finds you or they don't. That's not on your calendar. And then there are some who want to stay that and don't. Start out that way and evolve into too much business.
But I think there are shades of gray in that spectrum.
It has to be.
Yeah. It because to survive, you have to have some sense of your sort of obligations, and you know what I mean? Like I don't buy into that myth of like the starving artist who just follows their whims and no one understands them, and only after they die people get it. I think of it more like,
I find that pretentious, and obnoxious, and also narcissist to the point of insanity.
Totally. It doesn't work. But you know, I look at it more in terms of I remember hearing a great story about this guy like Jarvis Cocker, right? He was in this band Pulp, who are a great British band. And I worked with the same producer as them. And at the time, I think I was having some little disagreement with the record label I was on. And the producer said to me, Jarvis loved arguing with the record company. And I said, why? He said, because he genuinely believed that if he knew where he stood and they knew where they stood, at the end of the argument, a better third alternative would have been created.
Wow.
And it's kind of like marriage.
Sure.
Right? It's like in the best case, when it really works, you have two people who are actually really different, making art, creating a life that's a third option that neither of them would have envisioned.
Yes.
And I think that's highly creative too. So for me, I like collaboration, and I have moments where I struggle with it, but generally working within a system, I'm okay with it if everything's on the table and there's it's a reasonably trustworthy system where, like, say, I'm being hired because someone genuinely likes what I do, but I understand they have an agenda too.
Sure.
And I think there's a friction that is created in the different agendas that is genuinely creative. And that's not the same as compromise and selling out.
You're influencing each other.
Yeah. And you're discovering something.
Right.
So that to me is like, that's how we as people living in this town, navigating the sort of commercial and corporate interests of this industry, like I'm interested in how far I can go within these systems and structures, holding on to who I am, making things that are a little weird and a little subversive and getting them made and finding an audience, however small that may be, and being, like I said, taking the ability to influence through my creativity kind of seriously. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to like push for what my values are here. Right. And that's the fun of it, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like an art of war type thing, you know?
Yeah. The notion that compromise is a bad word, when in fact, as you just described it, I just described the feeling of that third position coming from two different positions, each influencing the other, but also finding new ground by collaborating. So I vacillate between, as a actor, my joy of giving the freedom to improvise. There are 6 lines in The Usual Suspects that are quoted back to me all the time, because I was given the freedom to improvise in certain ways, never changing the context of even a sentence, just having the freedom to not say every single word as written. Sometimes it's just that. But they end up being these moments, right? That screenplay went on to win the Academy Award, of course, and I've asked Chris McQuarrie, the writer, to let me have the Oscar 1 week out of 52. He still has 51 weeks a year where it sits on wherever the fuck it sits in his house.
Is the negotiation still going?
I've yet to take ownership for a moment. But then I'll work on something like, I'm in the midst of this Maisel thing that's written like a play that I want to just service the material. I don't want to spend any time wondering what I might bring to it in terms of the lines, in terms of the dialogue, in terms of what this character says, but to rather focus just on the interpretation, what mine would be with theirs as written, set forth, and then what they've written in my performance interpretation takes it to that third place.
But also isn't the joy of it that it's not like you have to pick a party line and stick with it your whole career? Like you get the flexibility of different moments that call on different tools.
100%.
And I mean, I feel the same in that like there are times I want to explore my own very nuanced, very idiosyncratic relationship to music. And I want to throw just caution to the wind, everything out of my mind, just make what I want to make. And then there's other times where being in service of someone else's vision is, I almost think I'm being more creative within like a very strict parameters of whether I'm producing or co-writing. And
you're being challenged in a way that you hadn't.
Totally. So I'm not sure. I mean, I've had great experiences with all of it. And sometimes I think like, you know, like when you're young and you have to be like, you can only like, you know, Nirvana or Pearl Jam or the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. Like you can only be one type of person.
Yeah.
And I think we sort of have this tendency, as teenagers, it almost reaches its peak to identify which type of person we are and stick to it and be totally, and you know, you think of the great, like, I love that Salvador Dali quote, I reserve the right to contradict myself. I don't think what makes humanity interesting is its consistency.
Right.
What makes it interesting is that we vacillate and there's moments for different approaches.
Yeah.
And I love all of them.
I saw Bohemian Rhapsody over the weekend.
So did I.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So the moment when I really enjoyed it. The moment when Freddie Mercury goes solo finally, and he comes back to the band and he explains to them, what he's basically doing is sharing with them where it went wrong. And where it went wrong was the result of him pursuing where it might go better, which was, he said, I forget the place he went to, the country, but I got there and I hired these great musicians and I told them what to do. And the worst part was they just did it. And I'd never heard it articulated quite that way before, in terms of you want to wrestle away control artistically of what it is your vision is. And you get to that place, and it didn't feel necessarily like Emperor's Clothing, where he was yesed to death. He hired great musicians, I'm left to assume, and they just followed his instructions because he was Freddie fucking Mercury at that point.
I'm friends with Courtney, who's the singer in that band, the Dandy Warhols, and he said something really interesting about the beginning of their band. He said it was perfect, right? It was like everyone was young and could play the right way and look cool, and everything was on their side. And he said, I realized I had to build in a fatal flaw. Otherwise, it would come and find us.
Wow.
So he said, so I got a girlfriend right before the album came out, and I stayed completely monogamous throughout the entire rise of that band, which that band like symbolized hedonism, and you can imagine what was being offered to him, you know? And he said, I had to choose an area to be unsatisfied. Otherwise, the thing would collapse because nothing's perfect. And I thought that there was such a brilliance and foresight. Maybe, who knows, maybe hindsight, he's changing the story. But what I love about it—
sounds impossible.
Well, it's kind of like, it almost reminds me of like Tibetan Buddhists who they maintain equilibrium through meditating on the decay of their body. So like they're very joyous and happy people through taking time each day to contemplate the most horrific thing. They're building in a flaw. Right? And so as a result, they can actually—
inevitable?
Yeah, because nothing is perfect.
Right.
It's a fantasy. As humans, we have this fantasy. It's like the Tower of Babel. Like we can build something that will be the perfect thing that will, you know, right? And there are cautionary tales all through mythology of this human tendency to control and to think that almost like we're godlike and we can make a perfect experience, a perfect whatever, being a perfect town, a perfect, and the reality is humanity. Oh, what else was like this was Shortcuts, the Robert Altman. That was, I feel like that movie and those stories, I think that was Raymond Carver, right? All those stories were about that. They were about these people's lives where everything was going great, and then life interjected. It inserted itself. The chaos and the tragedy of life popped its head up.
Right. And
I think that's sort of like it's interesting. We're circling around this, but growing up in this sort of the safe environment of the middle class with the academic journey and then the profession and all these, and is that you realize that to a degree, it's an attempt to safeguard yourself against the chaos of existence.
And why?
And as freelancers, we are people who are even on that level, just economically, forced to make friends with the unknown.
Right.
They're like, we don't know how much. We live next door to academics, and their whole career path is towards tenure, basically towards security.
Right.
And they look at our lives, like we're great friends with them. They're like, I don't know how you put up with the stress of it. But it's like if you invite in the unknown and you invite in the chaos, you can actually be really happy.
Not only that, but you feel more alive in many ways, because we don't live moment by moment, day by day with the so-called stress. There are little reminders that pop into our head. Oh, shit, right. I got to do this. I got to accomplish this by then because there's a mortgage payment. I got to make sure the nut's covered for this period of time. There's a little bit of that at some point in your journey. And if you're super lucky and fortunate and also endlessly proficient and ambitious and, all those things have to play their part as well. Then you get to a point where you have less of those stresses, but you've created new opportunities for stress. But if you're embracing the journey and you're embracing the art form and the independence of being even just self-employed, I don't think it's a version of stress that someone chasing tenure is describing.
Yeah, I don't either. And we live with it and we're happy people. I think one of the things that the realities of living as a creative person over, I'm just turned 40. I started when I was 14 as a musician. And so whatever that is, 26 years into my career, one of the things that has been developed in me as a result of the wildness of the ride and the ups and downs and this year people want to work with you and the next year no one cares about you, as it goes on, is that it's turned me into a defiantly value-adding human being. So when I look at, yes, obviously like collaborations and getting hired for things and, meeting people and that things. But I feel even when I walk into a room, I know the only thing I can control is how much do I feel that I've contributed, and I think in some ways, because we have to let go of the results so much as professional creative people, you start to become a bit more of a Jedi in terms of your contribution.
Right.
And I like the idea that when I leave a space, and I don't mean this in like a vanity way, I need people talking about me, but I just want people to think fondly of our interaction and think, that guy showed up. Yeah. He was present.
Yeah.
He wasn't phoning it in. He
delivered.
He wasn't asking me questions out of obligation.
Right.
He seemed interested. I've added value.
Yeah.
And I really have come to believe that being a value-adding human being can make up for so many technical shortfalls. I mean, there are so many people who make music technically better guitar players than me, better singers than me, better producers than me. I feel like at this point, though, I know that people like working with me because I work hard on making people feel good and make myself and having fun.
You, instead of keeping up with the Joneses, have made an effort to be better at what you can contribute.
Yeah, exactly.
And a desire to to do that.
And just like eye contact and being friendly and like, you know, not being phony and all those things. It's so underrated, you know, that how much amazing stuff can get created in your life by being someone that other people want to be around.
Right.
You know?
I sit on my phone so it stops making noise. That's the office that yanked the tooth out of my head. They want to know if I'm still talking about it. Well, you've touched on something that's kind of magical in terms of how does an artist evolve, and the idea that you would want to be a better contributor, that you would want to be more helpful in every project you involve yourself in, is wildly underrated and not much talked about.
Well, yeah, it's like for me, when I think back, because I was always interested in collaboration.
Right. Where did that come from, by the way?
I think what I saw in the indie and punk community was like everyone had like side bands and like it just was sort of, it looked fun. I can't explain it. I mean, it's probably like in the beginning why people join improv troupes and when they're in college, like it just looked fun.
Right.
Collaboration looked fun to me. And this is all probably putting the cart before those. I'm sure so many of your listeners don't know anything about what I do, but what I've realized is, except my music appeals to, it seems like a very niche part of the audience. But what I realized looking back was that I wanted to be a collaborator before I actually learned how to listen to people or care about what they had to say. Like when I think back at my younger self, I genuinely thought I had the best idea in the room. And I really relate to it when people, it's almost like cocaine. Like when people are talking and you're just thinking about what you're going to say. And like, I just sort of thought collaboration was a battle of me getting my ideas across. And
everyone coming around to thinking the way you were.
Yeah, it was like convincing people, basically. That was collaboration. And the collaborations I've been involved in over the last decade, I did a musical with Tom Robbins, who's one of my favorite writers. I think one of the great American writers still living. He's 86. And if I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, like Jitterbug Perfume, even Cowgirls Get the Blues. But collaborating with someone like Tom, who I've respected so much, or doing, you know, the music fair camping with Lena Dunham and Jenny Connor and really trusting their instincts about TV. Like it's like something clicked in me where I started realizing like, if I can just help them find a solution to what they're trying to do.
If they can articulate to you what it is they're trying to do.
Or I can help them find it.
Right.
Because sometimes they can't. Like we can't, I often can't express, when I'm dealing with visuals around like say an album artwork or a poster, I can't actually do it. Or I can't even often describe it, but I can give a feeling of it. Like, I want it to feel really optimistic and really, I'm using non-visual words that then a graphic designer or an artist has to interpret.
That's right.
And I can do that musically with people. And I started like loving people more or feeling safe enough to let myself love them and go, wow, Tom's an amazing writer and has made such a huge contribution. I just want to help him make something that stands up to the rest of his work. It's not like I'm thinking like, I'm going to reveal what a talent Tom Robbins is. Like the world knows what a talent he is. I want to help. I want to serve him. I guess that's what I'm talking about. Serving.
Right.
And that part of a collaboration was a mystery to me before. I wasn't mature enough.
Right.
And now I think in terms of like when I be sending cues to Jenny Connor on camping, I'd just be like, I just want Jenny to be happy. And if she's happy, I'm happy. And I'm not going to make something I don't believe in because it's like too late for that. Like when you're 26 years into making music, I was like, I wouldn't know how to pretend to make something I don't like.
Right.
But what I'm really concentrating on is like, how can I serve?
What does she want?
Yeah. How can I serve someone else? And so I feel like I relate to actors in that way,
right,
who I think get great joy out of serving someone else playing a chess game.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. I will say to directors, when they sheepishly want to give me input after a take, because they've been yelled at, I'm guessing, for overstepping somehow when directing, I'm quick to point out, I love being directed.
Totally.
I'd rather know how you visualize this and how I can contribute and make you happy. I've got my ideas on what I want to do, but I'd love to know what you're looking for. That would make me unbelievably happy, knowing that either I like most of your ideas. Here's a couple I'd like for you to consider. Take everything that you want to see in the scene happen and do everything I can to make that come true.
Isn't that amazing? Like,
It is.
we are speaking about such a basic form of generosity in the workplace that it feels like, I don't know about for you, but for me, it took years to become humble enough, or even close to humble enough.
I don't think the humble is a young person's game.
No, it's not, is it?
No, it's not a part of
because the arrogance, it's like,
Well,
I
the
don't know,
arrogant-
maybe it's survival. I don't know why we're so arrogant when we're young.
I actually think the arrogance comes purely from insecurity.
Right.
You're trying to be heard because you want respect. And then the older you get and the more experienced you become, the less insecure you are and the less you need to yell your opinion because you have much more confidence in it.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And it's funny because I think it's like we were talking about the rage that comes with adolescence. In some ways that serves a kind of evolutionary kind of goal too, where it breaks the teenager out of their parents' house.
Yeah.
And I think in some ways the arrogance of the young creative person, it does do something. I don't know what it is exactly. I'm so cautious of that side of myself because it's like I can still feel it in there, like wanting to rear its head.
It's still a part of you.
And I'm really like, I also know how destructive it is.
Yeah.
But I do see that there's a certain fire when you're particularly in your like early 20s that it's almost like you have to be insane to make that move to New York City or to LA, and you have to be delusional and arrogant because otherwise otherwise you'll look at the stats and the odds are not good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You have to be oblivious to rejection. You have to, and the pain of it and also the guarantee of it, right? You have to build yourself up to actually believe this is possible. Before the 2016 election, was finalized, I rather than alienate half of my audience as a comedian because I'm not a political performer, I found the one thing that I could talk about that wouldn't alienate anyone because it was a human behavior that fascinated me, which is who decides on their own in a moment, oh, wait, I should be president. Who has that ego? And is that person instantly a sociopath?
Yeah.
To actually, first of all, you have to pass the reflective device, the mirror. You got to be able to look in the mirror and go, yeah, this makes sense. Look at me. I should definitely be president. Then you have to run it past your better half, the one person who knows you and all your bullshit. And then I would act out that moment of how the fuck am I going to get it past her, this idea that I'm going to be the most powerful man of the free world, right? And every person, man or woman, has to cross that bridge.
That's what is, I'm really interested at this point of my career and my life in general is in responding to invitations. More necessarily than initiating certain projects. There are things I've initiated that have gone great, but what's really interesting, I'm finding, is what do people like? Where would people like my input? Where am I useful? Do you know what I mean? Like, not for me to decide, like, well, you know what I'd really like to do?
When people come calling and they want your contribution.
Yeah, and however small, however big, but like does it sound fun to contribute?
Right.
Because I think ultimately we all just want to be useful in our communities. And I don't think...
Also your time is precious.
Yeah.
It really is.
But I think show business as a community is not that different to any other community in that it's an ecosystem that we just want to feel like a valuable contributor to. And I think there's something I'm finding really liberating about, and again, it's coming back to this like service mentality of going, okay, I guess I've developed something of a broad skill set. Where can it be useful? And you tell me, it's if I go down in, I don't know, you never quite know what projects are going to be bigger than others in your life, but it may well be that, it's interesting. My wife's godfather is Klaus Vormann, who's an artist, right? He was a bass player and he played bass on Randy Newman's Short People and the Concert for Bangladesh and all that. But he's also a visual artist, and he did the Revolver album cover.
Jesus.
And a great visual artist, right?
Jesus.
But most people don't know about his bass playing now because Revolver and his visual arts really are like such a. But
you're this guy now.
At that time, he made a major contribution also as a bass player, and that is really out of your control.
Yeah.
What you'll be remembered for and what you'll. But it's nice to feel that you're rolling with needs of your. Like my daughter. I like, we're just going everywhere. I hope that's okay.
This is what happens without headphones.
Okay, good. Yeah. My daughter was making these bracelets, and she doing beads or something with a friend, and she's quite entrepreneurial. She was like, we want to go knocking door to door in our street and sell them. And they made headbands and all this. So I said, okay, look, she's 9. I'm not sending you just door to door, but I'll stand at the end of the driveway and I'll watch you knock on the door and go. And so she went to like a dozen houses, and she came back. She was like, oh, look, I've got $36. Like she'd sold a few. And she's like, we're going to make more. And she went back. I said, okay, what are you making? She's like, oh, we're going to make more of everything. And I was like, Goldie, look down at your tray. What have you been selling? And she's like, headbands. Nothing else had sold. They'd made all these bracelets, but they hadn't sold any of them. And I was like, you can make whatever you want, but there's clearly a need for these headbands. And it's not like you're not compromising. Like you made them initially, you like them. So why don't you make some more of them and sell them? And I was like, wow, she doesn't learn that in school. Mm-mm. Like that lesson that organically came up in a parenting situation that's a key to success.
Yeah.
Right? You're like, there's got to be a class. Why don't they teach that in school? It's like supply and demand, basically.
Diversify to find your interests. Diversify to find your talent. Diversify to find the joy in creating.
And then serve your community.
And don't be afraid when one of the things within the wheel of diversity exceeds in success among the others, to lean into that. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's just really interesting. I feel like a lot of these lessons are about like flexibility and service.
Yeah. Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan, you get hit in the face. When you get hit in the face, the plan changes.
Wait, is that right? Did you just say that? Is that
everyone has a plan
until they get hit in the face. That's right. I think said everyone has a plan to get hit in the face.
Sorry.
Really? That's
that might be the missing tooth.
Yeah.
There's certain words aren't being pronounced. I can hear it until you get hit in the face. And I'll tell you from starting out in stand-up, I liken that to a boxer in that you have people in your corner, but when you step into the ring, you're living moment by moment on your own instincts and your own experience and your own everything. The writer, the director, the choreographer, the editor. And so when coming up in your career, you started with a band that you formed, and then there's a solo.
Yeah, I went solo, started doing stuff.
But started to see insane success.
Well, more so, yeah. I mean, began a bit moderate, and then had a couple hits in Australia, a bit of songs in movies and things. I don't know. Yeah,
you can slough it off as much as you want.
No, but I mean,
there's YouTube evidence of you accepting awards.
Yeah, but in Australia. So I just like to be clear about, because I've never like won a Grammy. I've never had a top 10 record in America. It's like I just on the food chain in the American music industry, I'm like, I'm not that high. I would call myself a moderately successful musician.
How about regionally?
I am a regionally successful,
because
I'm a wildly successful regional musician.
in the regional aspect, again, all I know is what I was watching during the research, and winning what looked to be the Australian version of the Grammy.
Yeah. But you know what's good? Like I've sort of known a decent amount of like people who have gotten pretty famous in America. And it's like, it's kind of a crummy job. Like, being famous in Australia, you're still just sort of like one of the people. Do you know what I mean? Like people's like, oh, Bentley, all right, good to see you, mate. You know, it's like very like egalitarian. Being really famous in America to me doesn't look like a lot of fun. And I'm sort of glad I've gotten to see that as a bystander and realize like what's so great about how big this country is moderate success here is like you can really have a nice life. You know what I mean?
I wrote one book telling stories of the past and life, and it's called How I Slept My Way to the Middle. If you think it's lonely at the top, I'm here to tell you it's fan-fucking-tastic in the middle.
Totally, man. Yeah.
Because you do experience these versions of monstrous success.
Yeah.
When you were accepting and standing on that stage for Song of the Year and Best New Artist in the Australian Grammys, you were king of the world in your personal trajectory.
Yeah, it feels pretty good. I mean, what I liked about your intro, I really liked how you were talking about the eventual backlash.
Right.
Because one of the things that I think you develop as you get older is a sense of transience, and George Harrison, all things must pass.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas when you're a kid, the seduction of these peak experiences,
right,
you genuinely believe that you will be an exception and it will last forever. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like why young musicians and athletes and stuff often don't invest some money and like buy a house or buy an apartment because they just see the checks coming in each month. They're like, oh, this rules. And you know, they don't have the like conservative side that goes, oh, every journey comes to an end.
Right.
Let's set myself up so it'll be good in a few years. You know?
Yeah. And also the impossible nature of being just goal-oriented versus embracing that the journey is all of it. And so those plateaus are just goals that you fantasized about. And when you reach any of them, there's never an everlasting moment other than a memory of that night, you know. And so I still think it's important, insanely important, to celebrate and embrace and never let go of how magical that moment was in the journey, and not take anything away from what it didn't lead, diminish it by talking about what it didn't lead to and what.
For sure. I'm also in this idea of celebrating. I mean, I have this little band with Josh Radnor called Radnor and Lee. It's an acoustic duo, and people know him from, he was on that show How I Met Your Mother, and he's been in a lot of things. He was on Rise, but How I Met Your Mother was super, super big. I get to see that, people's response to him and stuff. But he told me something, I wish I could remember who it was, but when he was starting out, he did a piece of theater and an older actor came backstage and said, oh, you were really great. And he went, oh, I don't know. I didn't. And the person then said to him, if you don't start learning how to accept a compliment, you'll never be successful. Because you're literally saying no thank you to blessings coming into your life.
That's right.
You know, so I think this idea of celebrating, my goal is not to have like some kind of false humility when I'm correcting you about the various levels of my success, because I do acknowledge how successful in Australia my career has been, but I also want to be like just super grounded about it. Like in America, I never achieved my goals, and I'm sort of grateful for that at this point. Like I wanted to have like an arena career in America, and I didn't get it. But the career that I've ended up with is infinitely more interesting. Right. So I'm not saying it in some way of like, you know, I haven't. I know I've achieved something better than having hits. I've achieved some longevity in an industry that like spits people out within a year or two.
Instead of shooting to 20,000 seat venues, and then the fall from that, and then trying to get back there.
No, I love my career.
Yeah, of course.
But I don't. I think from that space, I don't feel the need to present it as other than it is. You know, like and I think I hope if there's like young musicians and stuff that my career would be an inspiration in terms of flexibility.
Right.
That you don't have to become like a goon that's just like doing soulless jingles for a commercial. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but that's people's idea of like, if I don't make it, I could always do, you don't have to do that. And you don't have to be like a failed genius. There's all this creative territory in between where you can offer your real skill and depth, So,
You're limited by your imagination and willingness to fail. And willingness to fail and willingness to invest in yourself with your own time. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And I think what you were saying also goes back to me having a problem of saying artist in terms of what it is I do, because I think I sound a certain way. It's much like you've heard an alcoholic say that one drink is too many and 1,000 isn't enough. So I finally come to grips with that's what compliments are for me. I used to joke that I'm on Twitter and not Facebook because I don't give a shit what my family and friends are doing or think, but I need the love of total strangers to fulfill my emptiness.
I saw Lena Dunham said something recently in a tweet that cracked me up. She said, my personal brand is feeling rejected by people I don't respect or admire. I thought that is so, she hit something on the head about people who are in show business that like, and again, once you're transparent about it, it becomes elevated to something else entirely.
Sure.
It's the harboring that as this weird shadow beast that's destructive.
Yeah. I mean, so in doing the research and seeing a moment on YouTube of you at this, I'm trying to make sure I don't
It was the ARIA Awards.
Juxtapose.
Like kissing
but there's
David
a
Hasselhoff.
moment where you lean forward, you have a hat on, and you say something like, this is the greatest album.
Yeah.
Was it This is the Greatest Album?
Yeah, okay, do you give some context about that? So when I was about 20, when you come up in Australia, like any Australian listening to this knows about this, but we have a thing called the tall puppy syndrome, which is basically, like anything that gets too big, you just cut it down. And so it is about always being, like I said, you're just one of the crowd, you're someone at the pub. And what I recognized was there was a certain type of artistic ambition that was almost not permitted. Yeah. Because it was seen as too flamboyant.
It suggested you believe in yourself too much.
Yeah, there was like it rubbed people the wrong way. And at the time I was really, watching a lot of like Andy Kaufman and different kinds of like provocative performance art in different ways. And I thought, it'd be really interesting if every interview I do about this album I made, Breathing Tornadoes in Australia, if I say this is the greatest Australian album of all time and I am the greatest Australian songwriter of all time, and say it totally straight-faced, but not even like it wasn't a game. It was also like, and believed it. Because like it's boring to just like do an act.
Or be ironic.
It's interesting if you also experiment with your thoughts and go, what if I think that too? And I let myself go into this space. And I knew it was going to be provocative a little bit deliberately because that was the point.
Sure.
I didn't realize how deeply offensively it would ruffle people's feathers. And
through the tall
puppy syndrome. Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny now to look back on it. It feels kind of quaint, at the time. But in Australia at that point, we didn't really now with the internet, when a new artist comes out of Australia, they're international right away. But then it was kind of still like, you're Australian, you paid your dues, you came up through the pubs and I already had taken this shortcut because like the Beastie Boys and Sonic Youth had helped me out, and I was 14 and I toured America before Australia. So I already had a little bit of this precocious kind of thing, Well,
there's no way your 14-year-old brain can even wrap itself around what was happening.
No. And the Australian music industry certainly also couldn't. So this guy
who does this 14-year-old think he is?
So the biggest band in Australia, the guy, Powderfinger, the guy, and we're cool now. This was years ago. He came out and in the main newspaper, he said, Ben Lee's a precocious little cunt whose music is a pile of shit, like in response to me saying this. And like clearly any humor I'd had about this experiment was lost on.
Gone in a moment.
And what I felt was I felt hated. And the record did really well. And the songs were strong and the record was strong and people liked it. But I became a bit of a public enemy.
Wow.
You know, and it was funny. It was like, but then you think, okay, well, who was I influenced by? I was watching Andy Kaufman videos. Like, that's what I was modeling myself after. So it's science. You get the same result, you know?
You also get punched in the face on Letterman.
Totally. So I didn't, but I didn't quite realize, okay, so this is getting a little, I guess, esoteric, like about creativity, but there are all different types of archetypes and energies you can harness as a creative person.
Sure.
And one of them is this, you know, this Andy Kaufman thing where you are holding a mirror up to the darkest side of the human psyche.
Right.
And then you're accepting the projection from the audience that you are that. You're playing that role. You're the bad guy, the bad wrestler, or whatever it is. And you're accepting the hatred. And that's an artistic victory because it's all in relation to what you set out to do.
You created it.
But what I felt was that the quality, the emotional quality of life at that time was not very high. And that perhaps these dark roles, they do need to be played. And we do need these bad guys. And we do need, but for me, I like to be a recipient of joy.
You learned how to take a compliment.
Gratitude. And I just went like, am I going to go further down this road? Because this is like, there's a long way down.
Yeah.
You can go there.
Yeah,
but I just kind of went, no, thanks. I'm going the other direction.
Right.
So that's what that was that you saw. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad I brought it up to get that context. Because I wasn't judgmental at all because I assumed you were just being ironic.
Yeah. Well, I was a bit, you know.
Sure, but you had also committed to, as you just explained, like an experiment.
Well, that's it. And I think some of the...
Because, you know, when Ricky Gervais, I don't know if you've ever seen him live.
Yeah.
He's one of my absolute favorites. And, you know, he loves... You know, like he came out on stage the last time he played in L.A. and his first name was 15 feet high in lit up letters. And it was so over the top that it was instantly hilarious. And he'll casually, not even winking, casually say, you know, I'm considerably richer than you are. And in the way he does it, instead of my paraphrasing, it's almost involuntarily hilarious as opposed to taking a moment to read anything into it at all.
But there are levels of sophistication that are lost. And this is what I liked about the scene with him and Gary Shandling in Judd's thing, right?
Yes.
That Gary Shandling understood that type of humor.
Right.
You know, I mean, arguably he invented the platform that Ricky Gervais went and like took and ran with and went, you know, by that type of show. But I think Gary Shandling was, and he was strong in how he reflected it back to him in that moment, but he felt ambushed in, if your listeners haven't seen, they have to watch this, you know, it's a very interesting moment. But I think what Gary Shandling was showing Ricky Gervais was, there is a level of receptivity and sophistication that you are not open to by playing an asshole all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like, and you are going to miss this moment where we are two human beings connecting with each other.
Right.
And if you want to pass that up, that's fine, but I'm open to it. Yeah. I'm open to being a creator, meeting a creator.
Yeah.
Going, let's see what happens.
Sure.
Where you don't have the upper hand and it's like a chess game, you know?
Right.
And I thought it's really interesting that like, you know, it's not a moral thing. I think there are all types of ways we can play as artists. But as I get interested in these more subtle and more sophisticated experiments that have to do with slight tweaks and slight shifts in different directions, as opposed to the punk rock, let me just knock it all down with a sledgehammer.
Right.
Life's kind of getting more fun.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I would think so.
Yeah.
How did your recent collaboration with Lena on camping come about?
That was kind of interesting, and I think it came from. So my wife's in the show. Ione's in. She plays Carlene in Camping, and I guess there was a scene where Ione's character had to sing something, but you know how it is with clearing music. Like this takes months, so they needed a song. So Lena was like, I didn't know she liked my music or anything, so she said to Ione, "If I wrote some lyrics, do you think Ben would put some music to it?" And so she sent me some lyrics, and because of just the way I am, I just sent like 6 or 8 versions of it back the next day.
Because you want to be in servitude.
Yeah, that's it. I was just like, cool, let me give you some options. And honestly, I think that began a certain creative dialogue and a willingness to play that combined with her and Jenny liking my music is kind of like, I think that's the kind of vibe people want on their teams, you know? So I'd never scored anything before, and I really have massive gratitude for Lena and Jenny being in their position. And I mean, this is also, I think, comes up from like more the indie community as opposed to coming in from the top of things, that you realize like the whole fun of rising is about who you can bring with you.
Absolutely.
And I love that they're really about that, like giving people chances to do things and, you know, younger directors and, you know, like putting people in unusual situations. Like I think what Ione was called to do acting wise, I think she's done probably the best acting of her career in this show, in a type of role that no one had given her the chance to play before. So they just have this willingness to kind of try it if their instinct says. So anyway, I ended up doing the music for the whole 8 episodes, and it was in ways that I'm still processing, I think, kind of life-changing, because again, it's like this whole collaboration thing that I'm so into.
Right. But also your music had been used in movies, something like Mary and whatnot.
But that was different.
An existing song.
Yeah, that was different. This was me writing to picture, like 15 cues in an episode and building the trust and building the dialogue with a creator of a show. And it was just, it was deep.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt very, very grateful to be involved in it.
And so you ended up doing all the episodes.
Yeah.
And you got a taste of what that particular creativity.
Yeah. And I'm not, it's funny because I met with the agent I'm with WME, and I met with the guy there who does TV scoring, and he's like, I met you 2 years ago and I asked you, would you like to do TV scoring? And he said, the answer you gave me was, it would have to be the perfect thing where the people actually respect my musical taste and they kind of bring it to me and ask me to be involved. He's like, and it happened. I was like, whoa, you're so right. I got to be careful what I say when I'm at WME. But the point being that sometimes I think it's worth waiting for the right, you know, opportunities as opposed to like bullying your way into certain things. And I'm not someone who, at this point in my life, I'm not someone who's like, I need to be within 5 years, I need to be scoring an Academy Award-winning movie, and I need to be like, I don't have like goals like that. I just want to work with cool people on things that are cool. And be
experienced and prepared enough so that when that opportunity comes, not only are you confident in experimenting and trying to be in service, but actually find, oh shit, I'm kind of good at this.
Yeah, well, I bet you've heard a lot of stories like this. You know, I hear stories about people choking with opportunity all the time.
Right.
Like people we love that were given a shot at the next level of things, and for whatever reason, some kind of self-sabotage came out in the weirdest ways.
Yeah.
Like in the lack of gratitude they expressed, or in a presumptuousness, or, you know, whatever. Sometimes the energy people bring into a workspace is just people like, ugh, not having them in again.
Yeah.
And so I think like part of ascending through your craft is learning to tolerate the anxiety of being in increasingly high pressure situations and still holding on to yourself and being connected to yourself, so that, you know, I want to be in a situation where if one day I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. If Ron Howard and Brian Grazer say, come in, we want you to work on something, where I feel enthused, not overwhelmed, I feel that I can actually express an authentic idea about what would be appropriate in that.
Right.
I could handle the rejection if they don't want to. Like, it's all about like, you know, like this is where the athleticism of, you know, particularly I think stand-up has it, but music has it too, of like not choking with opportunity and under pressure.
Based on your experience and instincts.
Yes.
Right? Serving you.
Yeah. Not exactly. Not just conforming and being, this is what Ron Howard and Brian Grazer want. I'm going to come in and be the, you know, but actually showing up as yourself.
Right.
And delivering.
Yeah. Like you said to the agent, when someone comes to me with the right project and they want to hear what I would like to contribute.
Yeah.
That's kind of an apex.
Of
creativity. Holy shit, man. Does it feel like we've talked for an hour?
It feels great. I love talking to you. It's good.
So the lack of headphones, I think, might have contributed.
I'm willing to accept the hypothesis.
Now that we've lived through it. All right, so let's talk about something that I thought I was going to lead with. I'm so glad I didn't.
I talk too much, so I could have just hijacked this and gone in directions you didn't want to go. I tend to just go. I
brought you here to do the very thing you've done.
All right, good.
Yeah, the least I can say, the better. The more successful this has been. Yeah, the worst thing I can do in my mind is to run over the conversation.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a bit about something going on very, very soon. November 18th. You and Lena Dunham are going to be on stage at Largo at the Coronet here in Los Angeles to discuss what?
Oh, we're doing a night called Champagne Superanalysis, a psychological exploration of the Gallagher brothers through readings and song. And it is... Honestly, we haven't had a second to really plan out the night.
Of course not.
So we're 2 weeks out, so it's okay. So wherever this airs. But we're pulling it together. But what it's about is that, I mean, talk about pretentious. People that are not open to this idea do see it as the most navel-gazing possible evening that could be had by entitled people.
But I'm guessing this came about because the two of you were together, and somehow the conversation drifted towards Oasis and the brothers Gallagher, and you started to talk about their breakup and philosophizing about how that might have been and where it might go and what the problems might actually be.
I think even less historical than that, it was an interest in, are you more like a Liam? Are you more like a Noel?
Yeah.
Or my hypothesis was we need to have both inside us, right? This is a holistic approach to understanding what the Gallaghers represent.
Right.
And it's kind of like a Mick and Keith thing, like Mick's the accountant. You know what I mean? We went to business school, Keith's the wife. And these are obviously, nothing in life is this tidy. But when you get to see an archetype played out so publicly, like Ione has me, anytime we find an interview with Noel or Liam, she has me read it aloud and we are in hysterics. There's something so perfect
magical
about what they represent, each of them. And so I guess Lena and I are interested in exploring this, and we're going to have different actors reading some parts. We're going to have musicians singing and interpreting songs. And I think for people outside LA, and probably a lot of people in LA, what Largo is, I mean, I'm so grateful for it. I first played Largo when I was 18.
Wow.
So the old Largo, opposite Cantor's. And it's taken me 22 years to actually grasp the opportunity to be part of a community that has a physical location where you can play.
Sure.
And I think a lot of different scenes have their place, their club, their clubhouse, but I feel so grateful that Flanny really, from back then when it was like Elliott Smith, Rufus Wainwright, it was much less comedy heavy than it is now.
Right.
But Flanny's always had interested in cultivating a type of community and experimentation and crossover that this type of night, where else could we do it?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's only there, and it's only there that I think people would come with an open mind enough to say, I don't know what I'm getting.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be fun though.
Well, that's how I felt when I first heard about it. I don't know what the fuck this is going to be, but I have to be there to find out. That's fucking great. That's November 18th, Largo at the Coronet here in Los Angeles. I would say get your ticket now. I'm very, very excited about that. Okay, so we've reached this point in the conversation where the segment's called Ask Kevin. You're allowed to ask me one question, and it can be sincere or silly, meaningless or meaningful, or neither of those.
Okay. Now?
Yep.
Just jump into it? Okay. I'm interested in this parallel career that you have created as an interviewer, as a content creator, as, you obviously, you've had a flexibility in terms of not needing to control how people see you, right? Because you like let people in a way by doing that. To what degree, this is just tied back to like this whole idea of flexibility as an artist. To what degree did that come from necessity? Did innovation come from necessity? And to what degree did it come from just interest and experimentation? Does that make sense? Like there are times in my life where I've taken new paths because like the phone wasn't ringing. And I was like, okay, I got to create my own opportunity. Yeah. And there are other times when there was like just a sort of organic playfulness that sprung up.
Sure.
So this whole side of you, because your acting career is thriving too, but you keep them both going, right? So this, what are the roots of this thing? Is that too big a question?
No, I just love the way you finally got to what are the roots of this thing. Yeah. So it'll be 10 years old in March. I would have to go back to 2009. I would say that I was in the throes of making a goodly amount of money, but not feeling fulfilled creatively. So that is true. It came from searching for something off the beaten path and not controlled, but wholly of my own launching. And I was feeling that, maybe without knowing it or talking about it, because I went to visit a internet mini mogul jerk friend who had a facility where he was basically creating a smaller version of a search engine 10 years ago that was people run, people searched. And as he was giving me a tour of the facility, he walked me into this little area that was a small studio with cameras and a green screen. And I said, "What is this?" He said, "One of the researchers here, he asked if he could do this show called This Week in YouTube," or something like that. Yeah, This Week in YouTube, where he would just go through the shit on YouTube that was popular that week and present it and talk about it. This was 10 years ago. There's probably 6,000 shows that do that now. And I said the following words without having ever thought them. I was looking around at the equipment and said, "I think I want to do a Charlie Rose from here, but fun." And now I would say, and less handsy. Because as a comedian and actor, I'd done every talk show and a couple dozen appearances on the Tonight Show, sitting next to Johnny Carson, that kind of seemingly monumental, and Letterman's and Conan's and all these wonderful. But 10 years ago, Charlie Rose was the one that I felt like I was talking to just an interested party where there was no pre-interview. All those talk shows have a pre-interview where you're basically auditioning your anecdotes. hoping that your 6 minutes will kill. Charlie Rose was, just show up. He's a journalist. He's done his research. He'll have some questions. And you talked for either for the hour, as he would put it, or in my case, probably 35 minutes. But it was a conversation with a guy who was seemingly interested and had just done his research. And so I'd always been way crazy fascinated by reading people's autobiographies and finding out how they got the fuck from there to here. And I was fascinated and remain to this day.
But you didn't have it wasn't like you'd had the idea brewing for an interview thing and you were looking for context. So you were inspired by the tools.
Yeah. I was inspired by the environment of that room.
Yeah. You saw a room, there's a blank canvas, and you said, what can I make with this?
Yes.
Okay, that's the answer.
Yeah.
Right. That's fascinating.
So it was all those years of being fascinated by people's stories, meeting the best part of being in a talk show as a guest, and wanting to be on the other side of it without knowing it, and wanting to figure out, what can I do with this space? Yeah. And the internet 10 years ago, in terms of live streaming, which is what the show was for the first 9+ years of its life, was unheard of. And he put me on Twitter 10 years ago, which even then, hard to imagine, but Twitter was, what the fuck is this?
I love that, though. I love how open how receptive you were to inspiration.
Right.
In that moment that, like, it sort of went against logic. Great moments of intuition go so far against logic.
Already 50.
Yeah.
51. The point being, holy fuck. Yeah, and again, those thoughts had never been collected, shared, thought in quiet moments. It had never occurred to me that I might want to do that. It just came out of me looking at the space. Yeah.
I mean, that is another example of, it's almost like what I was saying to my daughter about what is needed, which is literally about, like, I remember reading a thing Jasper Johns said about the stencils he used for lettering and numbers, where they, an interviewer said to him, you're a very successful artist, yet you use these stamps that just come from the art store for your numbers and letters. And he said, oh yeah, well, they come that way. And they said, yeah, but you could have your own made now. And he said, well, right, but I like them. And they said, well, let me get this straight. Do you like them, or is it just that they come that way? And he said, that's what I like about them, that they come that way. And to me, it's like a paradox, right? But the whole story is about, as creative people, I think part of what we fall in love with is the limitation of the various canvases or tools that we come into contact with. And we go, what can I do with that?
Yeah.
And hopefully we have enough self-confidence to trust the impulse that says, maybe I could do an interview show, or maybe I could put them together and, it's just.
Will people come and talk with me?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wow, that's so cool.
I also didn't know that it would take over my life in terms of, I have to book this thing.
Do you book it all yourself?
Until very recently.
Yeah.
So we're probably at 370 something interviews, and the first 350 I did on my own.
Wow.
Which meant, unfortunately, every time I met anyone interested, it popped into my head, ooh, get him on the show.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it didn't turn me into this heat-seeking missile, and I've not embarrassed myself or created awkwardness for others
that you know of,
that I'm aware of, that they made me aware of.
Yeah.
And no one has politely said no.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Cool. And awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you for that amazing question.
It was a very long-winded question. I was trying to find my way to it.
Long question, long answer, conversation.
Loved it.
Now it's time for Kevin's pop quiz. Between 5 and 15 points possible for each of the 3 questions. Once the final score is tabulated, it will be posted on our website, along with the current standing of the top 100. Are you ready?
Yes.
Keith David or David Keith?
Keith David.
That's correct. Question number 2. Carl Weathers or the weather in Carlsbad?
Carl Weathers.
Also correct. Last question. Steve?
No, thank you.
Let's go. 3 out of 3. 3 out of 3. How does he do it? Sam, the engineer, popping up and down, fist waving, a celebration if there was a balloon drop, if we had a budget. there would have been a balloon drop. Ben Lee, thank you so much.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
For spending some wonderful quality time, in my opinion.
It was a joy.
And taking the time out of your day, your family. I stole you away from all of it.
There's a lot of resentment you'll have to deal with.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And sit there uncomfortably. Unless there's something you would like to direct people towards?
I mean, people can check out, get on a streaming service, whether it's Spotify or Apple Music or, Tidal, and listen to this Beers for Beer, the musical album that me and Tom Robbins did. It's the soundtrack, and it features John Cryer, Rose Byrne, Belinda Carlisle, Laura Silverman, Paul F. Tompkins. Who am I forgetting?
Say the title again so that Americans can understand it.
B is for beer.
B, the letter B.
Is for beer.
Is for
the
beer.
Musical.
The musical.
Busy Phillips. Great people, funny people singing these songs about consciousness and childhood and innocence and the ultimate meaning of a long, tall brewski.
Oh, so good. And this is what you worked with
Tom Robbins. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Now sit there uncomfortably while I wrap things up for the folks at home.
Sounds good.
Wherever they are listening to this. Thank you all so much for spending your time with us as well. You know what? Thank you. Write to us, please. kpcsfanmail@gmail.com. Love to hear from you about this or anything. Thanks to Corey Levin in post. Thanks to the fine folks here at Earwolf for their auspices. And Sam, the greatest engineer that show business has ever experienced. Certainly my takeaway from all of this. Until next time, and as always, I'll remind you, stay tuned, because following this interview, I'm going to play the trailer, one of the trailers, from Alchemy This, a comedy podcast you should listen to however you get your podcasts. And until next time, get out of my face. Welcome back to Alchemy This. I'm your host, Kevin Pollak. Yes, that Kevin Pollak. What's that? Yes, I know I said I was ready to buy the car. I'm just not. Sweet listeners, over the years, I've been crazy lucky to see my fair share of true alchemy. By definition, alchemy is, quote, when a person creates something through a seemingly magical process. And you lovely dingleberries, like I said, I've been witness to this stuff on several occasions. An example, you ask? Okay. When separated, only 50% of Sonny and Cher had undeniable talent. Speaking of which, not too long ago, while having my conscience scraped and rinsed, the idea hit me. What if I brought together the right creative people and asked them to make shit up based on my own twisted, demented ideas, then offered a podcast of this seemingly magical process? And I could call it Alchemy. Why can't you be more like your brother? Well, after a bit of title tinkering, I'm so very proud to welcome you, dear friends, to another episode of Alchemy This.
Take a photo. I'm gonna get a photo of this.
Hey, get back away, please. You see the tape?
No
photos. No photos, okay?
What do you see? What do you like? What do you don't like about this?
I don't like anything about it, Peterson.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what I noticed right away. Cigarette still lit.
Yeah.
That's strange.
Peterson, you've got a Holmesian eye for detail.
Well, I studied under the great
Sherlock Holmes?
Nope. You.
Oh.
Oh, that was my cigarette. Can I have that back?
I misunderstood. I thought it was in the...
Oh, no, I left it there.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like a holder.
Yeah.
You thought the dead guy's two fingers would help hold your cigarette.
Well, I was taken aback by the whole thing. I wasn't thinking clearly.
Tell us your name again, please.
Oh, Turla.
And you're the waitress.
Well, I'm also the floor manager, but yes.
Turla. How do you spell that?
Turlah. Turla.
Okay, the traditional way.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. I'm very shaken.
And do you remember this particular patron from inside the diner earlier?
You know, I do remember that because as a floor manager, I'm very adept at remembering people's faces, remembering our interactions. He wanted his eggs over easy. I said, that's not going to be a problem. Unfortunately, it was a problem.
So he's having eggs late at night.
That's correct.
We
serve breakfast all day. It's a great menu. Protein is good for you, you know.
You said it ended up being a problem, the eggs that you ordered.
Well, yes, not my problem, but Frank in the kitchen, he doesn't fucking understand things. So I said over easy, and he fucked it up.
Frank, you want to answer to that?
Yeah, but you know, it's.
Oh my God.
No, hold on a second. Let me speak for myself here for a second.
Okay, no, you can speak for yourself.
All
I just
right.
want to warn them. They have made the biggest fucking mistake of their lives. Do not get your notepads out for this, detective.
You're gonna want to take some of these notes down, all right?
Jesus
First
Christ.
off, if you guys are ever hungry late night, come over to my house.
Over your house?
Come over to my house.
He does not have a house. He does not have a house.
All right.
That's
do you
an
rent?
overstatement.
Do you rent?
Kinda. I move around. You know what I mean?
You're between situations right
Yeah,
now.
a little bit between a lot of situations. You know what I mean? My
I don't feel
mom-
we're getting a straight answer from you, Frank.
Come on, man. Let me just tell you what you
Are you
mean?
the cook here?
Yeah.
Okay. And so when the eggs were ordered, what was the problem?
Well, number one
I'm
is
very interested to hear this. Thank you, detective. I've been asking him that as well.
my question is always like over what? You know what I'm saying? It's like over easy. It's like all right, but like over what? You know what I mean?
Well,
Hey,
over easy is the answer. Though.
Peterson, can I talk to you by the dumpster for a
Sure.
second?
Will you two excuse us for
Yeah,
Excuse us.
just-
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, leave me alone with this.
I like Frank for this.
You do.
You like Frank for this?
So far.
Okay.
I feel it's a little early. I feel like we
Look, I know it's early, but I get hunches. You know me and my hunches. You learned under me, my friend. You
It's your
trained
nickname.
under me.
But there's a couple of other fellas out there that I'd like to ask a couple questions.
How many times have my hunches
I'm
paid
going
off?
to write down it's Frank.
Or how many times have we at least framed someone based on a hunch that I had?
I don't know that want to say that so loud.
Excuse me? Excuse me?
Yes.
Officers?
Yes.
Hi, my
Detective.
Detective.
name's Detective.
We're both detectives.
My name's Bobby. This is my twin brother, Robbie.
Hi.
We saw some things.
But we're not supposed
We're
to
not
be
gonna.
here.
We
We're-
can't be here.
Bobby and Robbie, those are both derivative of the name Robert. So you're both named Robert?
Well,
I don't know.
they weren't expecting twins, so they only had one name prepared.
But we saw things, but we can't really tell you because we're not supposed to be out so late.
No, this is way past our curfew.
Yeah, I got the time of death at 4 a.m. So, yeah, my first question would be, what were you two kids doing?
Eating,
Eating.
only eating
Just eating food in our mouths.
In the diner?
outside.
Yeah, well, outside the diner. But it was,
Uh-huh. Which one's Bobby?
I'm Robbie.
Okay.
I'm Bobby.
Sure.
I don't
Are
think that's
these
what you
guys
said
giving
at
you
first.
problems? Excuse me, are they giving you problems, these kids?
Turla,
Yes.
do you remember these two?
Oh, yes, I remember them. Hello,
Hi, Turla.
Robert.
Hi.
Yeah, they've been outside scrounging. They're always scrounging.
We
By
ain't-
that, of course, you mean...
Scrounging. You know, they're scrounging. They're
We
both
ain't
little
gotta-
scroungers.
we ain't got a good home life.
No, not as good as you.
Oh, well, I'm very, very sad to hear that. None of us have a good home life. Can we all agree?
Peterson, can I talk to you about
There's
the
a
dumpster
dead
for a
man.
second?
Excuse us.
Excuse us. Excuse us.
Absolutely.
I like Robbie for this. What do you think?
I'm writing it down.
Okay, write it down. I'm not sure which one is Robbie,
To
but I
be.
like Robbie for this. It's definitely not Bobby. We can rule